All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talkin' Ball live with Pat Leonard. It is Monday, September 22nd. The Giants are 0-3, and Brian Daboll is leaving the option open to a quarterback change in week 4. Welcome to a download of the Giants' week 3 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll go around the league here on Talkin' Ball live with Pat Leonard here on this Monday evening, as the Lions and the Ravens play on Monday Night Football. Got Derrick Henry in a fantasy league here, so I need 22 to get to work. But I'm thrilled to be here with all of you diehard Giants fans, this community here on Talkin' Ball, because coming out of our post-game live on Sunday night from MetLife Stadium, there was anguish, there was frustration. If you look on my Twitter account, my handle there is P Leonard NYDN. Joe Becker, a diehard fan, season ticket holder, who joined us on the podcast last Thursday night to give us a voice of the fan, a perspective of somebody in the seats who has a legendary Giants man cave. He posted a video from the stadium afterwards talking about how difficult it's becoming to invest as much as he does in not just money for tickets, but also in driving 3 hours each way to attend these games and to pour his heart and soul into rooting for a franchise that keeps running out the same disappointing product and does not address the fact that they have not just slipped, but fallen so far into the NFL's basement that they're at a point where they're 3-14 last season, 0-3 to start this year. They've lost 14 of their last 15 games and 17 of their last 20. And yet there still is not conversation outside of columns I'm writing for the Daily News and a handful of others about the job security of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. The conversation right now is centering on the job security of Russell Wilson, the starting quarterback for the New York Giants, who had an explosive day in Dallas in week 2, but of course ended that game with an interception, a costly one that set up Dallas for a game-winning field goal. And so now at 0-3, with the Giants scoring fewer than 10 points in 2 of their first 3 games, as Daniel Jones flourishes in Indianapolis and is playing like a combination of Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, and Peyton Manning, shattering records all over the place, both NFL and Colts. This leaves us at a crossroads for the Giants. And now they were already at one going into this year, but the offseason is a time when the Giants can pump out Instagram reels and fans can get excited about draft picks who haven't hit the field yet. And admittedly, the fact that they were able to get an exciting pass rusher in Abdul Carter and their preferred quarterback in a trade up in the late first round in Jackson Dart, there was reason to believe that the Giants were adding more talent. And for a fan base starving for some hope, it got you to come around to, you know what? I've been burnt recently, and I've been burnt in several years recently as a Giants fan, but I'm ready to believe again. And that's how we entered 2025. And yet immediately the Giants have hit the skids. And that brings me to the primary conversation of this podcast. And that is twofold. As I mentioned, the job security of Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen. We're going to go into that. We're going to talk about the Giants as an organization and their direction and what ownership should do, what is happening. But I think the most immediate dilemma, the most immediate, decision, and the most important call that they have to make to dictate both their short and long term is what to do about the quarterback position. At the moment, Brian Daboll, as we sit here now, his most recent comments about whether he will consider a quarterback change is, we are evaluating everything. That is the closest a coach is going to come to saying, yes, it's possible I'm benching Russell Wilson as my starting quarterback. Now, Daboll's not going to say that outright, but when he is continually asked about whether he's going to make a quarterback change, whether he's open to it, after not committing again to Wilson after the game. Now he's not committing to him on Monday, and he's saying that organizationally they are discussing what to do at QB. That tells you, it confirms for you, it's on the table and likely happening, if not this week, then imminently, either in the middle of this game where he would get benched, not just for a dart package or a couple plays, but could get benched after a poor start to this game for a Jackson Dart. Or it also opens the possibility of Jameis Winston being the starter if the Giants don't feel that Jackson Dart is fully prepared just yet. I believe a key element to that decision, not just benching Wilson, but also benching Wilson for Dart, is Andrew Thomas's health. We know that Brian Daboll and the Giants believe that Jackson Dart is prepared to play an NFL game because they've been playing him in NFL games. They've had him active, elevated over Jameis Winston as the number 2 QB on the depth chart. So he's been active. He's been playing. They've played him mostly as a specialist and a runner and an athlete, but they did dial up a passing play for him in this last game, although Steve Spagnuolo dropped coverage and Dart ended up tucking it and running it, I think, for a 3-yard gain. But what it comes down to right now is if you're putting Jackson Dart on the field, if you're starting him, if you're taking Russell Wilson out, it's a changing of the guard, and now it's in Dart we trust. You want to believe that you are putting him in an optimal situation to succeed. You do not, by any means, if you're Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, want to put Jackson Dart in at a point where not only maybe he is not ready, but that the offensive line and the team around him are not ready to fully support him. And so that brings us to Thomas. Marcus Bowe, although the rookie showed promise in Dallas, Marcus Bowe, after replacing Andrew Thomas, who played, I think it was first 28 snaps or so of the game, Marcus Bowe was tagged with 9 quarterback pressures allowed by Next Gen Stats. I believe PFF had him at 7 pressures allowed. Regardless, those numbers, not acceptable. 5 quarterback hits, according to PFF, 7 pressures. His pass block grade was, atrocious. And listen, this is a player who was not supposed to be in this position. Joe Schoen paid money to James Hudson to be this guy. James Hudson proved in Dallas that they can't count on him. So now you have the rookie 5th-round pick who's shown some promise, but whose position coach, Carmen Brasillo, told us flat out, coming out of a promising training camp, he didn't say he's not ready, but he said a lot about how we need to continue developing him. He's shown some progress here, but he has to learn more about this and that. And, physically, mentally, this is a player who he's showing you some good technique and he's fighting. But if we're talking about taking on the Los Angeles Chargers at 3-0 undefeated coming across the country to face the Giants, is Jackson Dart playing behind Marcus Bowe the best thing for Dart? No, it is not. If Andrew Thomas can ramp up his snaps and he can play a full game and Dart can play behind him, now that doesn't solve all of your issues. You can't snap your finger just then and suddenly everything's okay. Not like it's going to be perfect, but that does make you feel better about what it looks like. Now, all signs are, including what Daboll told us today, Monday, all signs point to Thomas coming out of this game so far physically in a good spot. He did say after the game, because he said he's felt good, and somebody asked him if he felt good enough that if he, didn't have the snap restriction, did he think he could play the whole game? And he said, we could talk about that, but the whole point of this was we weren't going to go past our number of snaps because we didn't want to risk a setback. So that's right out of the left tackle's mouth, which is, I feel good, but we're being as cautious as we can be. So given that the Giants and Andrew Thomas are kind of walking this slowly towards week 4 and beyond. Let's say Andrew Thomas goes from playing roughly a quarter of the game or a little more to more like halfway to the third quarter. Is that enough to satisfy you that Jackson Dart would be safe behind that line? Maybe, maybe not. If you do not know exactly how Thomas is going to feel then, if you cannot guarantee that Andrew is going to be on that blind side, this is where I think Jameis Winston enters the picture. And I see all the questions rolling in. We will jump into the queue. Thank you so much for being here on Talkin' Ball live with Pat Leonard here Monday, September 22nd. Grateful that you're all here. We're sponsored here, of course, by MyBookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Boom, Chaga, Mushroom, Super Drink, and Salaretta for Men. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, brought to you by diehard Giants fan Jared, owned and operated by him, originally from Houston. This gentleman brings us all natural, big Texas barbecue flavor right to your tailgate, your home gate, wherever you're watching the game. When you're grilling, you need Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. You can see it over my shoulder. They've got award-winning flavors up and down the board. Go to hooksrub.com, use the code Talkin' Ball, and get a 15% discount on all the flavors and the merch. Hooks also sponsors our Giants trivia giveaway every night. So we'll have a Giants trivia question tonight. When I ask it, the first person to answer it in the comment section will win some free hooks delivered right to them. And of course, MyBookie, the code is Leonard, Leonard, for all of your betting needs. Pat's Picks is back. I felt good about our results this week. Chiefs best bet covering, Colts covering in spades, and on we go. But whether you're betting the lines, the money lines, player props, as well as UFC, MMA, and the casino also is a great time over at MyBookie. Go to mybookie.ag, use the code Leonard, Leonard. Get a deposit bonus today. Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally feel a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today and use the code TalkinBall25 on the subscribe and save option for 25% off. Start feeling the difference today. Boomchaga.com. All right. Grateful to our sponsors. Grateful to all of you. Remember, if you want your comment or question answered or addressed first, purchase a super chat or super sticker. It will jump to the top of my queue and I will answer it or address it immediately or next in our lineup there. But as we wrap up and get into our fan questions, and then we go around the league as well with some observations of mine, I wanted to finish by saying that Jameis Winston should be a part of this conversation. He should be an option here, because if the Giants determine they still want to keep Dart on the sidelines and they don't want to force him into the lineup just yet, or if Andrew Thomas is not necessarily going to be able to play enough to their liking for them to feel safe about putting Dart into the field, Jameis Winston, if you think about it, why would you be making this quarterback change? You're making this quarterback change because you're trying to win more games. You're trying to score more points. You're also trying to make sure that the team feels you're putting the best team on the field. And when Brian Daboll said we're evaluating every position, he's obviously dancing around that the quarterback is one of those. But throughout the lineup, you have to be able to look your players in the eyes and tell them that you're putting the best players on your roster, the best options available to your team on the field. Because if guys feel like they're giving their all and they're looking to their left or their right, and they feel like someone is in the lineup for the wrong reasons or hasn't earned it or whatever the case may be, that is not a great place. And that would be potentially even the death knell for a regime like Shane's and Daboll's that is hanging by a thread. So in my mind, you have a guy like Malik Neighbors who just had a career low game because his offensive coaches and his quarterback were unable to get him the ball simply against two deep safeties. I can promise you this, as I wrote in the New York Daily News today, there is no way on God's green earth that Jameis Winston would stop throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors and not find a way to get it to number one just because there was a second safety deep on the field. Now, would he turn the ball over? Has he turned the ball over? Has he shown a penchant for doing that at times? Yes, of course he has. But Russell Wilson's turning the ball over too. The whole premise of handing the job to Russell Wilson, the whole reason why Joe Schoen and the Giants, didn't give Jameis a chance to even win this job, and they believed that Russell Wilson was the better option, is because they thought Russell Wilson, in addition to pushing the ball down the field, would protect the ball better. But 3 interceptions from overtime of the Dallas game through the end of the second quarter against the Chiefs in this Sunday night loss here on prime time that we came out of MetLife Stadium home opener with the fans booing Russell Wilson when he came into the game, cheering whenever Jackson Dart went in, chanting, "We want Dart, we want Dart," to get it all started. That is what brings us here today, talking about who should go in at quarterback. That's what I want to know from you guys. Which quarterback do you feel like should replace Russell? If there are those of you out there who do not think Wilson should be benched at all, would love to hear your take on that and why. And also, like I said, definitely would love, as we did last week, to go over some things around the league that we're noticing, that we're hearing, and that are jumping out to us. Hooks kicks us off with some fire. As I said, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, hooksrub.com. Listen, if you're tailgating, if you got the flat top burgers, if you're like me and you're a big time brisket guy, only one way to go, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. Jared, thanks for being here. Michael, what's going on? Great to see you. Jaden says, I was at the game. It felt like a Chiefs home game. Jaden, that's a really interesting point by you, because I don't know how much I went over it last night from the stadium. But very early on, when the fans started coming into the building and the teams were warming up and it was about half full, it was very clear that there were a lot more Chiefs fans and there was a lot more red in the stadium, I think, than anybody expected. Now, we all know that over recent years, this has happened. People selling their tickets, road fans invading the stadium. And at the end, when the Giants fans leave, all you hear is the visiting crowd cheering and moving down to the lower bowl, right? Or to those front rows. But, those things have happened over the course of seasons slipping away, right? Generally. And then over the course of the last few years, it happens earlier and earlier because people lose hope faster because they say, oh, more the same, more the same. This was the home opener, though. This was the home opener for the Giants for the 2025 season. And this is the crowd you get. And I said it last night, but I'll say it again. When Patrick Mahomes threw that long pass to Tyquan Thornton that ended up being ruled incomplete just before he then threw the touchdown to him, when the fans saw Thornton catch that first ball before it was ruled incomplete on review, all the fans saw that. And I would say, 10%, 15% of the stadium stood up and just left. And even when the officials announced, actually, just kidding, on review, the ball hit the ground, it's incomplete, I was looking around the stadium to see how many people were stopping to turn around and watch, and it was not many. They had seen enough. They knew what was coming. They knew, just like I did, that if it didn't happen on that play, it was going to happen on the next play. So, and during the national anthem, when they scream out Chiefs during one point of the national anthem, that was super loud, super loud. H-Town, health and wealth to all. Thank you so much, H-Town. Great to see you. Looks like we got a super chat in the queue. Novice, what's going on, Novice? Thank you so much for kicking us off with the super chats. Novice says, do you expect Daboll to take over play calling when Dart starts? I think he will to scapegoat Kafka again for offensive failures. I wouldn't put it past him, Novice. I think that, I said last year when Daboll took over play calling full time after yo-yoing it back and forth from Kafka, I said, listen, if you're going to go out doing what you feel like you do best. Go out doing what you feel like is, if there's one way to save your job and you feel like your top talent is play calling, that's what you should do. But obviously, we're a year past that now. And John Mara asked Brian Daboll to give up that play calling. So now we find ourselves at a juncture where he's already taken it over once and it didn't work. And you have the owner saying that he would rather see him as the head coach and not the play caller. So you're right. Dart is a new element to it and a new wrinkle to it. Novice, I'll be honest, based on Daboll's behavior and, I don't know. I would put this in the category of Shane Bowen when we say, oh, will they fire Shane Bowen after that Dallas game, for example? I would say I don't know how much clout Brian Daboll has left to, let's say, can Mike Kafka or can Shane Bowen or neuter Mike Kafka again and, keep his job, when the whole point of this is we've already seen several different ways of them trying to make this work, and every way has now failed 3 years running. I wouldn't put it past him to try to do what you're saying, Novice. And obviously, to our point that we raised earlier about, like, listen, you have to reevaluate everything when things are going poorly. So that would include how you're coaching the offense as well as how players are playing it. But I would say, based on how they've mistreated Kafka going back to the 2022 and 2023, I don't know if he could get away with that. I don't know if he could get away with that. That's a really good question. PM, what's going on, PM? Great to see you. Thank you so much for the super chat. PM says, do you see any scenario where Daboll gets let go in season? Maybe if we start 0-8 or something like that, it's important to keep him for Dart. But if it gets that bad, you need to do something. So I certainly think, PM, that, so let's go to the schedule, which is something I did a lot today. And I was on the phone with sources who were also doing the same thing. Because definitely the way that a team season starts, you can always look at it and say, you can always say, hey, this team is in this spot, but it's still early. They have a long way to go. And you always want to see, okay, if this team started 1-2, do they have obvious opportunity to immediately recover in the next 4 weeks? Or if a team started 3-0, are they going to come back down to earth even though they came out hot? Or if they start 0-3, as unlikely as it is, even if they're not going to turn their whole season around, is there a way to make it look respectable, right? So you're always evaluating that. And when you look at the Giants' schedule, they have the Chargers at home, the Saints on the road, the Eagles at home, and then the Broncos and Eagles on the road through week 8. So what I would say is I do believe leading up to the trade deadline there, and with October 26th at the Eagles prior to the trade deadline, and then the Niners coming into New Jersey after that, I certainly think it's possible that if they that if the Giants were able to either only win one game by that point or none, then what are you even holding on to at that point with the head coach? Because the team will continue to deteriorate. You'll completely lose guys like Neighbors and Carter, maybe even a guy like Dexter Lawrence, right? Who is frustrated, even though he's not making much of an impact at all. So I think, do they want to fire their head coach in season? No. Do they usually do it? No. I think also, like, as much as I've been the one asking the questions when it deserves to be asked, like after week 2 in Washington last year, are you concerned about your job security? I didn't ask it after the Chiefs game because I thought they committed to them in January as much as they deserve to be fired right now, and they deserve to be fired in January. I could not see the organization committing in January and then before September is over, firing the head coach. The only thing worse in their process than keeping them would be then giving up that quickly. It would be such a flip-flop, especially because everyone, ownership on down, GM, everyone is on board with believing through this summer that this team was going to be good. So do I think he'll get fired midseason if they're 0-8? Yeah. Yeah. I think at that point you would do it. The question is at that point, how much does the GM remain safe or stay in good graces versus if the team is going in the tank and you have, continued either character issues or locker room issues or whatever it is, if they continue to hit the skids. I do believe, though, that if the Giants can in any way as an organization, cling to a sliver of hope and consistent process through the end of this season, they're going to try to do it. Now, one thing I do think could change that is, will somebody fly a plane over the stadium on Sunday when the Chargers come into town with a banner, just like people did last season? Will the fans turn up the heat so that it's not just, the same old with the Giants playing these games, people getting their hopes up, the organization saying everything's fine, and then they go out there, they fail to make critical plays in key situations, and they continue to lose, right? I think that if the fans get loud and stay loud as you guys have been, and the results continue to go in their opponent's way, then you could get to an unavoidable breaking point there. But again, remember, there was the financial element of them having them on 5-year contracts and not wanting to owe money while they hire the next regime, which is something they continuously did in recent years. If you fire Daboll, who else are you firing? Who are you retaining? Who are you promoting? Presumably with Mike Kafka as the assistant head coach, you would be elevating him. But will you do that so early in the season? Maybe it's something that you do later. They do have the bye week back there in week 14. So you could always play it up to then. And then if at that point it's hopeless and it's a lost cause, you could try to give Mike Kafka, who has been an extremely good soldier considering how he's been treated here, and really has, at times, to be honest, had his tail between his legs too much. But he's done the right thing politically to keep his head down for what he hopes, I would think would be a career that returns to the same trajectory it was on when he was at Kansas City. And so maybe a bye week firing would then give him a 4-game audition with the Commanders, Vikings, Raiders, and Cowboys. But to your point, and to Pete, and to 2 points raised earlier, like with Novice, with Dart, Daboll was so instrumental in the recruitment and selection of Dart and the evaluation of him. And that relationship is so key that when the quarterback gets in, how the quarterback is developing is also a factor. I think if they are able to scratch out some results, the Giants are looking for any reason to keep them. But I think that the reasons remaining to keep them are, in my opinion, non-existent. And I think that once we get to the bottom line of all of this, I do believe that at the end of this season, they're definitely going to be looking for a new head coach. The only question is going to be whether they're looking for a new general manager as well. Novice says Neighbors was throwing up his hands pre-snap when Russ checked to runs in the first half. Daboll gets fired if the locker room implodes. Not by record, in my opinion, Novice says. Yeah, I mean, that was what saved Daboll last year too at 3-14 was just he, continuously pays close attention to the players and manage that. Now, Novice, the one thing I think that's a really good point by you. The one thing I would slightly disagree with is that last year they did kind of implode right after that Tampa Bay game. I mean, the team basically got walked over. There was give up on the team in the second half of the season on the field in multiple games. That Tampa Bay game where Baker Mayfield did the Tommy DeVito sign after that touchdown. I mean, I will never forget it. I've never seen an organization, or I've never seen the Giants organization mocked like that during a game. It was unbelievable. The fact that they ate that, accepted that, stomached that. I mean, it's pathetic. But Daboll and Shane survived that, so that's why it is in such a weird spot. But really, I mean, we'll talk more about it with the records and everything, but it is just astounding where the Giants standard has fallen to. Super chats continue to roll in. Thank you guys so much. Navas, good observation on Neighbors. There was also a play in the second half where it looked like Neighbors was bothered by the play going the other way. And if you noticed in the fourth quarter, there was a deep shot from Wilson to Neighbors. Remember, Neighbors went up for that one in the end zone and got banged up. There was one later after that down the left sideline, thrown kind of over his head. The safety's coming in over top, the corners just below Neighbors in coverage. It was a play where normally you would see him go up and try to get it, and Neighbors didn't even leave his feet, didn't make an effort for the ball, just kind of trotted and watched it go over his head incomplete. And then if you notice on Russell Wilson's final play, the fourth down, where instead of trying to push the ball down the field, he just ran and got tackled for 2 yards because he was under pressure and couldn't handle it. Neighbors made a beeline sprint almost right to the sideline, wanted no part of being on that field any longer than he had to be. Candyman, what's up? He says, I know you and others miss Wink Martindale, but in reality, our defense was 26th and 27th in both yards and scoring in 22 and 23. Thoughts? Candyman, you're absolutely right. They did give up yards in those seasons. I would say two things. One, remember the roster in 2022 that they inherited. It was a poor roster. They did have healthy for the full season Saquon, Daniel Jones, Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence. Saquon, got a little banged up, but played through. So their top players stayed healthy. Graham Gano. And on defense, Candyman, what Martindale brought right away, if you remember, some of the games, the personnel they were starting on defense was astounding. But what he was able to do with his pressures and his scheme was win on third down and get off the field or hold teams to field goals, so not break. And along with that, they were strong in the red zone. They were among the league leaders, I believe. Someone could go check these stats, exactly where they finished. They were pretty high that season, despite the yards, though, Candy, in red zone and third down. And in that first 6-1, 7-2 opening stretch of the season, the defense really was either key, clutch in key moments or strong in those areas to help them win and to kind of drive that stretch. Not to mention they forced, I believe, one of the seasons they tied for the league lead in takeaways with the Ravens, I think, with 31. But yeah, if someone has those numbers in front of you, let me know. But that's I believe what the state of the Giants was on defense. Steve Keys says, good Lord, John Mara should crawl in a hole and hide. What a dumpster fire this coaching staff is. Just when you thought it can get any worse, it does. Start Jameis Winston. Can't get much worse. Yeah, I agree. Unless you think without equivocation Jackson Dart can handle whatever you're throwing at him, then put Jameis Winston in. If you think Dart can handle it, put him in. If you don't yet, and if you're wavering, go to Jameis, right? That way, also, if it ends up coming to putting in Dart and not having Jameis on the roster, or whether it's a trade deadline and you're trying to offer Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston off to somebody else, I'm not saying you're getting a lot there, especially for Russ, but I'm just saying now you have guys who have all played football, and who have put it on tape in the regular season this year. You have teams like the Bengals. I mean, I know the Vikings won this week, but there's several teams who are out there who are going to need a quarterback like Jameis. But Also, Jameis can help the Giants, as we see. Like I firmly believe by the end of this year, we'll look back at it. If you let Jameis play 3 or 4 games for this team and Russ plays 3 or 4 games, I firmly believe you'll look back on it and say that Jameis was the better quarterback for the Giants. That's what I think. PM says, who deserves more blame for the results since 2022, Shane or Daboll? That's a good question, PM. Let me take another sip of this vino really quickly. Thanks again for being here. Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard, Monday, September 22nd. Wrapping up week 3 as the Ravens and Lions are tied at halftime, 14 apiece. Reviewing Giants Chiefs, talking about the quarterback situation. Are they going to bench Russell Wilson? Where do Shane and Daboll stand job security wise? Why are the Giants so pathetic year in and year out? What is going on with the standard of the organization, and how, if any way, can they try to fix this to make it look more respectable? PM, I think they share the blame. I don't think it's fair to point at one or without pointing at the other. I've said this before. I think they both deserve credit for things like the 2022 playoff berth and the playoff victory in Minnesota, but they also deserve blame for the bad, and they share it. Now, I think where Shane's blame belongs is especially after that first 2022 season. They inherit a roster that they know is not very good. They have an easier schedule, and their coaching staff puts their heads together. Shane makes some targeted acquisitions, including players like Nick McLeod, Isaiah Hodgins, guys who really help them at depth in key positions. Hodgins, of course, a touchdown machine down the end of that season, and even caught one in that playoff game against the Vikings from Daniel Jones. And that year was a year to have some belief that there was some progress being made in some ways. Now, John Mara, of course, is the leader of the misevaluation, announcing we're back to, I believe it was Ian O'Connor of the New York Post at the time, in the locker room in Minnesota. And Joe Shane, hook, line, and sinker, right there with the Maras and the Giants ownership in saying, we are back. It's time to now reload for next season and go for it. And we think that we're way further ahead in our plan than we thought we were when we inherited this job. And that is where Shane let this entire process and team and coaching staff down, is by misevaluating, making certain decisions at that point that were closer to, trying to reinforce and reload a roster rather than rebuild a roster. So that change in plan cost them. They did not show patience with the build. And along with that impatience, the general manager's drafts, as you can see now over the course of 4 years, have not been strong enough. Their roster has not been stocked well enough with talent from 2022 through 2025 with the draft picks Joe Shane has used. And you see, it's extremely concerning watching, like, when the team pumps up a player like a Theo Johnson, but then you see the regular season games and you're wondering what they're talking about and thinking and looking at, right? Or when Drew Phillips shows some promise, but then when he's put into the spotlight into a tough position, he gets picked on. Or, now I'm not picking on Marcus Bowe, but I'm just saying there's reasons why players are fifth rounders. There's reasons why if a guy shows a little bit of promise, that doesn't exactly mean he's an automatic, great pro. These are the things that, misevaluating, rushing the process, and then not drafting well put Joe Shane and the Giants in a position where then they had to adjust and build this roster on the fly, primarily through free agency. Daboll, though, deserves blame for, along with Shane, but you have a quarterback in Daniel Jones who as they inherited the Giants, they didn't think they were inheriting Daniel Jones for the next 10 years. They were going to try their best, but it was more like, hey, we'll try to make this work, but most likely We don't have the team to do it. We're going to have a tough first season or first couple of years, but we're going to have some high draft picks. We're going to get a quarterback and we're going to go. And 2022 success changed all of that, including the re-signing of Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll and Joe Shane going to full believers and saying, yeah, I developed Josh Allen. We ran this in Buffalo. We were able to fix this and that with the Bills, and we're going to bring that, to New York. And, people who doubt us will be wrong and all those things. And you get to a point now where 2 years later, the Giants have blamed Daniel Jones last season for their offensive shortcomings, benched him, released him, and in the process, allowed him to go to a situation where he, just like Saquon Barkley, just like Sterling Shepard, just like Xavier McKinney, just like a lot of these former Giants, is able to now prove that he flourishes somewhere else once he gets away from the stink of the Giants organization, from the system and the process that are broken here that do not set up players to succeed most. And that is obviously, when you talk about situational football and poor performance in those areas, when you see the Giants, whether it's penalties, whether it's injury management with a player like Cano, that's roster wise and coaching wise, right? They're putting their heads together to make decisions like that. The Giants just consistently can't get out of their own way. And I think at times it's both the coach and the general manager. And often it's both of them. And the last thing I would say is Daboll is supposed to be a great offensive mind. He has this reputation as a quarterback guru, as an offensive expert. And yet what we've watched in New York for most of his time here is that is not the case. And outside of Josh Allen, there is not evidence on his resume that reputation has been earned. And so, Gilbert Arenas, of all people, is somebody I quoted in my column for the Daily News today. I did not have on my bingo card that I was going to quote Gilbert Arenas, 3-time NBA All-Star, in a New York Giants NFL column in the New York Daily News. But he put it so perfectly on, I believe it is the Arena Gridiron podcast. He said, as soon as Daniel Jones gets out to the Colts, he looks like a number 1 pick. The Giants replace Jones with Wilson, and then Wilson looks like Daniel Jones. He said, so obviously the problem is the kitchen I'm in. It's the Giants kitchen. No matter what you put in there, it's going to cook the same recipe. This is organizational for me. Now, Gilbert Arenas obviously is a professional athlete who has been in organizations and knows how it works, but that is an extremely accurate and astute description of the Giants' issues and the reason why we can both sit here and analyze who should the quarterback be, but also acknowledge that the problems and the reason this team is where it is go way above that. Coach, GM, owner, etc. Great question, PM. Thanks for keeping the conversation going, supporting the channel. Really appreciate you. H-Town, good to see you. Let's see. Alex says, Dart is the last card this failed GM and head coach have. So they'll keep hiding behind Russell Wilson for as long as they can. After that, they'll need another year with their QB. Stop giving Mara your money. Jay Faries says, Hooks, the barbecue legend. Jacob says, smack that like and sub button for my brother Pat on your way in. Thank you, Jacob. Yes, please hit those likes while we are live. That engagement and the algorithm churn out more recommendations to NFL fans out there to come join us, more Giants fans to come commiserate, analyze, and discuss the team and the league and the sport that you know and love. And subscribe to the channel. If you're watching and you can't ask a question, it's subscribers only to ask a question. Honestly, just prevents the spam bots from filling our comment section. So subscribe to the channel, and after about 5 minutes, I think it should allow you to weigh in to the convo. Tiger Metal Stack, what's up? Says it's the ownership needs a change up, maybe a new person in charge of the whole thing, but not an owner. Peterstown says, hey, Pat, we cannot let this regime touch Dart. They will ruin him. By the way, nepotism is killing this team. Chris Mara is a huge problem. Peterstown, I don't disagree with you about trying to keep him away from the stink of this regime, but unfortunately, they're the ones who picked him and drafted him. And so, it would seem that they would obviously get a chance to make it work. Yes, there is a chance that Dante Miller Turbo gets elevated. I would think he would, since he's the next running back up with Tyrone Tracy out. Separated shoulder, according to our colleague Jordan Ronan over at ESPN. So Tracy is going to miss some time. You could tell that from immediately him tapping his shoulder, that it was something that wasn't going to be just like coming back in the same game or next week. Also, where is the lucky piano? I'm sorry, I do not understand that reference, Jacob. Joe says, Pat, the Chargers will hooks rub the Giants fans into an air force of spicy plane messages over the stadium. Jay Farry says, this team's marketing is such a scam. Fans fall for it every year. By week 4, it's the blame game again. H-Town says it's the same broken record. Mara loves incompetent coaching staffs that constantly fail at their jobs because they can't even make the team better than what they have been since Tom. They are like 45 and 99. Let's see. H-Town says he has evaluated everything for 4 years, let the Hall of Fame Quadzilla walk out the door, purposely sabotage Jones and Wink, and now looking like the JV coach for an NFL team. You said it, H-Town. You said it. The Giants and Brian Daboll did all of those things for sure. All right, let's keep it going. Randy says the lame duck coaches and GM shouldn't be allowed to make decisions that impact beyond this year. GCN says, Pat, here's the question that gets you banned from the stadium. Question to both Shane and Daboll. Both of you thought Russell Wilson was a good quarterback after 3 Super Bowl coaches let him go? That's a completely fair question and a good question, GCN. That should put you in the press conference. Clean house now, says H-Town. Let O'Hara be the interim head coach and let Pat be the GM. I guarantee it would be better results. This coaching staff doesn't know where to find their butt if you drew a map to it. H-Town, so funny. GCN says, to Shane and Daboll, did you watch Russell Wilson film from Seattle, Denver, and Pittsburgh? What did the scouts say? Why do you think those teams released him? Yeah, no, exactly. Well, it's interesting because on the one hand, obviously Russell Wilson was like plan D or E at quarterback after they released Daniel Jones because people didn't want to play here. But also they did believe, number one, that Russell Wilson would be a significant upgrade to Daniel Jones. And number two, they also, of course, believed that he was clearly better than Jameis Winston because that's why they didn't let them compete. Savage Steve says, what's up, Pat? Hope all is well. What's the percentage that they go with Dart this week, realistically? Steve, I think it's on the table. I think if Thomas is healthy, we could see it happen for the start of the game. I wouldn't rule it out. I do think they're trying to, they're really trying hard to wait to do it. I still think it's coming soon. I saw Phil Simms went on Kay Adams's show podcast, and he basically said that although he doesn't think Dart will start the game against the Chargers, he could see him going in for Wilson if Wilson struggles early and like a benching of Wilson mid-game. And then if not, then he thinks in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Dart is the starter anyway if they don't get results. So, that sounds totally accurate and vibes with the types of things I'm hearing and have believed. I do think, though, Daboll's conversation and his answers and his desire, right, all point to the fact that Dart could just very well start the Chargers game. But like I said, do they feel like Andrew Thomas is going to be able to play a full game? Do they feel comfortable putting Dart in that position against a defense and a team like that? I don't like the schedule conversation just because people are like, oh, we'll put him in New Orleans. It's a softer landing. I mean, playing in New Orleans against the Saints down in the Superdome, that's not an easy game. It's still an NFL team. It's still an NFL game. I understand. But if you're going to make him your starter, if you're going to replace Russell Wilson at some point with Jackson Dart, then he's going to be playing good teams. Like you could say, oh, we don't want to start him against the Chargers. That's hard. Let's start him against the Saints. Well, let's say you put him in this for the Saints and he starts there. The next game's against the Eagles. And then he plays the Broncos, and then he plays the Eagles again, and then he plays the Niners. You know what I mean? So it's not like oh, let's play him against the Saints and then everything will be easy as long as we don't put him up against better teams and defenses. It's he's either ready or he's not. So what's the percentage? I would say, well, Jameis is involved, right? So I would say, starting Dart at this week right now is at, maybe he's at, maybe it's like Russ 40%, Dart 30%, or Dart Russ 50%, Dart 30%, Jameis 20%, some kind of layout like that, like all options on the table, not wanting to pull the plug yet, but also recognizing something has to be done and no other lineup changes are going to impact this team the way that the quarterback position is. And that is what needs to happen. They need to be able to score more points. Jay Farry says they're like a bye week for the Chargers. Not necessarily, Jay. I will say, now, I'm not saying they're going to win this game. They're not going to win this game, in my opinion. But, teams, when they're coming all the way across to the East Coast from California, from the West Coast, they tend to, start slow. Those games generally end up a little bit lower scoring than people anticipate. Not always. I've covered Giants teams who have given up a ton of points to, the Rams, the Seahawks, West Coast teams here. So I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be a low scoring game, but sometimes these games end up being tighter than you think. But yes, I do think this is not going to be a fun one for the Giants. They were 6.5-point underdogs at home to the Chiefs on Sunday night. They are now 6-point underdogs to the Chargers at home. Back-to-back weeks, 6 or more point underdogs at home. Brutal. Let's see. By the way, really quickly, I'll stay in the queue and get to all of these questions next. We have another super chat here from Novice. Let me check that in first. Novice says, no way they have the courage to demote Russ to QB3 after 3 weeks in order to start Jameis. Probably have to cut him, and they aren't doing that yet. Novice, that's an astute point by you. I think the politics of it, like you said, are to be considered. So that's a smart comment. I agree. That's a factor they're weighing, right? Not just about who gives us the best chance to win. It's also trying to handle that delicate balance of the room and the locker room. But ultimately, you need to win games. So it's a factor. It's not the driving factor, I do wonder, I'm glad you said that. You reminded me of something that I was thinking about on a previous point. Let's say they started Russell Wilson in this game against the Chargers with an eye on possibly benching him mid-game if he struggles for Dart. I wonder if Wilson would prefer to, as Derrick Henry tries to throw a touchdown pass, and it's batted down incomplete by DJ Reed of the Lions. I wonder if Wilson, because listen, the Giants have given Wilson everything he's wanted here, right? They handed him the starting job. They announced him as the starter. Even though Jameis wanted to come in and compete, they did not allow that to happen. They didn't let it happen. They didn't set it up to happen. And I would think, based on how I've seen this proceed, that they've been giving Russell Wilson a voice, more of a voice than you would expect a player to have along the way in some of these things. So if they were looking at this game and saying, Russell, 2 options, either we just bench you flat out to start the game, or we give you a chance to play, but if you struggle in the first half, we may pull you and bench you for the rest of the game for Jackson. If you give him those 2 options, I would wonder what he would say. Now, everybody wants to play. And he would, I'm sure, be confident enough in himself to say, I'll show you, I'll prove myself right more than I'll prove you guys wrong and all those things. But there's also ego involved. You look at Russell Wilson on fourth and goal from the 10 yesterday, throwing the ball out of the back of the end zone instead of giving somebody a chance. Why? Are we afraid of throwing another interception? Mark Andrews gets in, Ravens take the lead mid-third quarter. So, I think that's a conversation that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. All right. So as we before we get back into the queue, wanted to go quickly around the league, tell you guys what I'm seeing. I think rapid fire, let's look at just teams that are in first place across the league. The Buffalo Bills obviously are going to be a difficult team for people to deal with and are going to be in the playoffs. They're going to win the AFC East. They might even end up with a bye in the AFC. Their defense is not good enough, in my opinion, to win a Super Bowl this year as it looks currently. Now, I know they've had Milano and Ed Oliver out. They have to get them back healthy. But I worry about their defense when it comes to playing the other best teams in the league. Of course, you saw they were still able to come up in the clutch and beat the Ravens in that crazy game to open the NFL season in prime time in week 1. But, I guess the point is the Bills are obviously clearly one of the best teams in the league, but it's because of their offense right now and not their defense. So I think that's something interesting to watch. The New York Jets, absolutely killer loss. What a crazy Sunday with those field goal blocks late. The Jets fall to 0-3, and now just an all-time ugly Monday night slate kicking off with the 0-3 Jets against the 0-3 Dolphins. Hopefully you all have something else to do on Monday rather than turning the TV on to that one. The AFC North, Cincinnati, obviously tied with the Steelers at 2-1, but they won't be up there for much longer. Baltimore, Cleveland upsetting Green Bay, but I think the Ravens are definitely the best team in that division as long as they stay healthy enough, with their top players. Indianapolis, we have to talk about Daniel Jones, right? Probably should have led with him as we go around the league, but what an incredible and damning development for the Giants that this continues in this way. But the numbers on Daniel Jones and where he stands and how it reflects on the Giants are just amazing. So he is the first NFL quarterback since 1970 to throw 3 touchdown passes, run for 3 touchdowns, and commit no turnovers in the first 3 games of an NFL season. So that's the AFL-NFL merger, 1970. Jones is the first quarterback ever since the merger to do that. 3 touchdown passes, 3 touchdown runs, and no turnovers in the first 3 games of a season. The Colts offense has only punted once so far through 3 games. That is the fewest by a team in a season's first 3 games since 1940. Again, let me say that again. Only 1 Colts punt in 3 games, the fewest by a team in a season's first 3 games since 1940. The Colts also with 103 points through 3 games. That is an Indianapolis era record for the Colts organization. Peyton Manning, I believe I saw the stat from The Athletic, did it 3 times, got to 100, but never got to 103. So Daniel Jones eclipsing that. What a season he's having. Jonathan Taylor, obviously a beast on the ground for the Colts right now as well. But happy for Daniel and the Colts off and running. In that division, wanted to point out, Nick Caley, this offensive coordinator that they got who has these Patriots and Rams roots, that is a total mess, that offense in Houston. So disappointing. That team is so talented. I think they were so in love with a roster and a quarterback that had so much talent and potential and really, honestly, proven results from a standpoint of getting their organization and team to a certain spot of the playoffs, and consistently kind of in recent years with Stroud looking like the team that was maybe going to own that division for many years. But their offense is so bad, and their defense obviously hasn't come up well enough either in key moments. But the reason they're losing games is they can't move the ball an inch. They can't move it a lick. The scheme stinks. Nobody's open. Even when there's protection, Stroud doesn't seem like he's seeing anyone open or enough options. And at times, like what was it? Was it the Buccaneers game when Todd Bowles was sending pressures their way? Caley and the Houston Texans offense didn't look like they knew how to protect. Like they didn't look like they knew how to run protections very well for the pressures and the blitzes that they were picking up. So that's a situation to watch that is deteriorating fast. Chargers, obviously we'll see them on Sunday. That won't be fun for the Giants. That division is going to tighten up there. Denver's 1-2, but improving. The Chiefs 1-2. The Giants let them off the mat. That's bad news for everybody. The Raiders look like they stink. They have some players. I'm a big Geno fan, as you all know, but they look like they stink. Let's see. We have the Eagles, obviously very fortunate win, but they made it happen. Great example of and the Giants obviously have had years when they've been up and they've just found ways, right? I mean, we know their Super Bowl runs with Eli Manning. It was nothing but finding ways in imperfect games for the most part. But that game where they win against the Rams, where it looks like they were dead to rights and the tale of two halves, but also blocking 2 field goals in the second half in the fourth quarter, I believe. And Jordan Davis returning it for an all-time crazy cover of the betting line. But this is just what winning teams do when they're up, when the vibes are high, when they believe, when they never think they're out, when they have talent at key positions. It's just what happens. This is the flip side of where the Giants are right now, always finding a way to lose. Dallas, keep an eye again on a situation in Dallas. As I said, on Houston, Nick Caley, a name to watch. Matt Eberflus in Dallas. Hard to imagine he's going to last there very long as defensive coordinator. Now, Jerry Jones didn't help anybody by trading Micah Parsons. Of course, that might be the worst defense in the NFL. Chicago gets off the mat to 1-2 with a big game from Caleb Williams, thanks to facing the Dallas defense, which, as Russell Wilson proved, can make a quarterback look like a mirage. We'll see if it was a real thing for Caleb as he continues to go. Backup quarterbacks was a story this week. Minnesota wins big. Their defense routing in a battle of backup quarterbacks. Jake Browning for the Bengals, atrocious. Carson Wentz did what he needed to for Minnesota, but their defense, special teams, absolutely dominant. A total butt kicking up there in Minnesota, my favorite stadium in the league, US Bank Stadium. The Packers fall to the Browns. I think that team is excellent. I do have questions about whether Jordan Love really is the guy when push comes to shove. So I expect him to be in the playoffs. I expect him to, probably win at least one playoff game. But this is a kind of game that you just saw. They run up against a stout defense and the offense needs to, make some plays. And now the clamps are on them. And suddenly it's like, well, the defense isn't going to just completely win the game. The offense has to help them out a little bit. So, the Browns took it to him. Credit. Kevin Stefanski does a great job out there in Cleveland. I continue to say that he would be a great fit here. But, of course, if he keeps winning games like that, he won't be leaving. I had doubts about this Lions team coming into the season with the brain drain for their coordinators. They still look like a very talented and tough team and not an easy out. I think there are not a lot of very good teams in the league. And I think, I don't think I predicted them to make the playoffs, but with Minnesota's uncertainty at quarterback, with JJ McCarthy out, and they're saying he's injured, but also maybe they want to give him a little bit of a breather from the experience that he went through in the game. Maybe they want to wait till when Addison comes back and he has Addison, Jefferson, etc. So we'll see. But Detroit definitely looks like a team that nobody really is excited to play still. Credit to head coach Dan Campbell there as Jared Goff drops back to pass. Looks like he just hit Amon-Ra St. Brown for a game-tying touchdown late in the third quarter. This game is a strong one. The Ravens are just in good games. They're a good team, but they're in good games. Their defense not getting stops. Their offense cooking. A lot like the Bills. The playoffs will be interesting. And then going through the rest of the league really quickly in the NFC South and NFC West, Tampa Bay finds a way. They are super banged up, so it's important for a team like them to be 3-0 right now with so many injuries, especially to their offensive line. That'll be something to watch. Atlanta, The Texans offense, like I said, the most disappointing unit in the league. Atlanta definitely had the most shocking and disappointing performance of week 3. I took that loss against the spread on the chin. But a lot of people were saying that Carolina Panthers weren't very good, didn't look very good. They hadn't looked very good, frankly. And Atlanta was showing progress, especially on defense. They just fired Ike Hilliard, former Giants receiver, as a receiver coach down there in Atlanta. Interesting, scapegoating a receiver coach. You have to think something must have happened or been said after that performance, where Penix actually comes out of the game and Kirk Cousins re-enters. So a little drama there. A nice win for Carolina. And New Orleans, man, hard to understand how you put that on the field against Seattle, but we'll be interested, very interested this week in seeing what kind of team New Orleans puts on the field in week 4 here, because we could easily be looking in week 5. So we have the Bills against the Saints, right? Are we going to learn much from that game? Probably not. They're probably not going to give the Bills too much of a fight, you wouldn't think. But they were competitive in their first 2 games. They were not competitive against Seattle. You'd like to, if you're the Giants, be able to see whatever the real version of the Saints team is in this game. There's a great chance that week 5 game, Giants Saints, is a battle of 2 0-4 teams. So I'll be watching that one closely just to see, can they hang? How badly do they not hang? They are 16, I repeat, on my bookie, 16-point underdogs on the road at Buffalo this week. That's brutal, too, going to Seattle and then Buffalo back-to-back. That's a little bit strange. And then, let's see, last but not least, the Rams have to be sick. They played such a strong game and then coughed it up. San Francisco, surprised that they're 3-0, especially with Mac Jones playing 2 of these games. They're tough. Bosa injury obviously is big. That division, I think I saw a stat today that's the only division in the NFL right now where every team has a winning record. All of those teams are competitive and teams that can win any week, I think, against most teams in the league. So right now, the NFC West, impressive. It'll be interesting to see who settles in into the playoffs there. Early picture in the NFC, you look at, let's say, Philadelphia, Green Bay, Tampa Bay at the top. And then in the NFC West, even if let's say the Rams end up settling in up there, you have those 4. And then when you start going to the wild cards, it'll get mighty interesting, especially if the NFC West tries to load up at teams like the Cardinals, who I picked to win that division, stay competitive and stay kind of in the mix. All right, let's see. Want to make sure I get back into the queue, but that is my round the league. Hopefully that gives you guys a taste of what I'm seeing and hearing. All right, let's get back into the queue. Actually, before we get back into the queue, let's do our hooks, rubs, and spices trivia question of the day. Now, for those of you who are regulars, you know how this works. I ask a Giants trivia question or an NFL trivia question. When you have the answer, you think you have the answer, you enter it in the chat. You put it in the comment section. The first person to enter the answer into the comment section correctly will win some free product from Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. So this is for your tailgating, your home gating, wherever you are grilling and watching the game. This is going to make that flavor, that big Texas barbecue flavor, all natural, pop on your burgers, cheesy nachos, smoked wings, brisket, whatever it is that you're cooking up. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices has a flavor for you. Also great merch, hooksrub.com, at hooksrub, wherever you follow them on social media, including YouTube. Join the flavor family today. Use that code Talkin Ball for 15% off at hooksrub.com. All right, here we go. The trivia question is, the Giants have started 0-3 this season. Since they won the Super Bowl in 2011, So that is 14 seasons. Since the Giants have won the Super Bowl in 2011, the last time they won the Super Bowl, how many times have the Giants started 0-3 in a season? I'll repeat. Since the Giants' last Super Bowl victory in 2011, in the 14 years since, how many times have they started 0-3? And I'll be very impressed if you can give me the years as well and not just the number of years. But I'm only asking for the number of seasons. All right, I'm finding where I'm at in the queue here. Let's see. Jossol, what's going on? He says, hey, Room, what's going on? Hope all is well with you, Pat. You right back at you, Ja. Thanks for being here. Let's see. H-Town says everyone can feel better. Ravens on the 1 yard line couldn't get it in with 3 Derrick Henry runs and a quarterback run play with Lamar that fumbled and lost 16 yards. So maybe it's not Daboll. You're funny. Jay Farry's correct. If they lose the Saints game, it will get ugly. If we were being honest, none of the quarterbacks earned their spot, says Josh Soul. Yes, that's a very, very good point. That's a very good point. Steve, you got it for pointing out those Russell interceptions. I mean, you know, everybody likes to call it the moon ball, but what I watched on Sunday night was a bunch of lollipops. Not acceptable. Steven says, I think it is ridiculous how they are handling this with throwing in darts sporadically and the camera showing him the whole game with his helmet on the sideline, making their own mess. It's because, from my vantage point, Daboll wants him in. Jay Farry says, the front office in Daboll is like that Spider-Man meme. That is excellent. Excellent. Great comment. You're absolutely right. Hirsch, what's going on? Yeah, So Candyman says, what's your feeling on in-season firings? And I'll get to your guys' answers in a second, find out who answered it correctly first. He says, I feel Mara won't do it because it proves he's screwed up by not firing them last year. Yeah, that's part of why I think maybe he gives them a little more time than you would imagine. NYOG, the Dallas game killed Daboll. We will lose to the Chargers, and then we will see Dart. This is a brutal schedule. Thierry thinks it makes no sense to bring Winston in. Yeah, you know, there's arguments for and against it. I think if you want to get Malik the ball, and you know, Jameis Winston knows how to get a top weapon of ball. Just remember, a new head coach and GM would want to draft their own quarterback, says Hirsch. Well, that would also be part of maybe firing the coach, but not the GM. That's also, though, an argument for letting Daboll get through next season because he's the one who steered the process towards drafting Jackson. Joe says, since the Giants have no tight ends, playing the scat man at tight end when he is not. Play the scat man at tight end. I assume you mean for blocking as well as catching when he is not running the ball. GCN says the season is over. They should test out all their players for next year on who they want to keep. Man, in week 4. All right, let's get to the answers here. Wow. We had a lot of people right out of the gate get it correct with the number of seasons. Tiger Metal Stack, KJ Manoni, and Dan. Tiger, I think that's back-to-back victories. If you're willing to cede a win to KJ, because KJ, I think, would be a first-time winner. You know, since you have one coming in the mail, that would be cool of you. But we could also try to set you guys both up, and Jared could maybe throw in a sweetener, Tiger, into the package coming your way from him. So congratulations on winning that. It is 5 seasons. So the Giants have gone 0-3 to start 5 of their last 14 seasons since winning their last Super Bowl in 2011. They started 0-3 in 2013, 2017, 2020, 2021, and now here in 2025. Just an incredible amount. Yeah, Tiger trying to hog all the free hooks. Oh, yeah, no, Dan dropped all the seasons right there for us. Love it, Dan. Nice work. Dan says all the years too. So here's how we do this. Dan, nice work. All right, so we'll hook up Dan too because he was dead on this too for sure. Dan, Tiger, and KJ, you guys shoot me your information on Instagram. So that Instagram is PL on NFL. So direct message me your handle. PL on NFL is the handle. And what you're going to do is send me your name, your address, and your email address. David Montgomery off to the races. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. What a big run for Detroit. Holy cow. What a game this is. That reminds us we're probably going to wrap this up for all of us to watch the fourth quarter in a little bit. But, yeah, Tiger, KJ, Dan, send me your name, address, and email address. I will get those over to Jared from Hooks, and we will hook you up with some of the best flavor out there for your grill. Okay, Tiger said give it to KJ. Yeah, you got it. Sounds good. Yeah, Tiger. We'll give it to KJ. We'll throw in a sweetener for you. Nice work, fellas. All right. Let's see. We talked about in-season firings. Yeah. Yeah, right. Just probably buys him a little bit more time, but, still possible. Let's see. Tiger says yes for the planes. Bring the planes. Feels like Neighbors has no confidence in cringe Russ at all, says Jay Faries. Bad body language for sure. It makes no sense whatever to play a quarterback where you have to throw lateral passes or dump offs, says AJ, for sure. Joe says, Pat, try not practicing this week and no game plan. See what happens. Cannot be worse. Everyone says Gruden took a great Tony Dungy team, won the Super Bowl that Dungy should have won, but they fired him. So Gruden isn't proven, has done nothing outside of 2 AFC titles with loaded teams at the time. GCN says they got the offense going with Gruden, though, and then after the Super Bowl, the team fell apart. Hooks says this is where a lot of people thought we would be record-wise. I just had hope. Yes, they did lead in takeaways under Wink. Dan Campbell did play for the Giants. Let's see. H-Town says, Pat, when you asked Daboll about the quarterback situation, his response was vague. How did you feel personally when a coach doesn't take real accountability in your face in live time because it was disgraceful? H-Town, I will say this. Like I asked the question a little bit generally because I knew he wasn't going to answer the who's starting next week. We'd already done that. So I was putting it more like, hey, forget what I think and forget what you think. The fans see it, right? It's no hiding it now. The home crowd is leaving the game early and saying we don't want to watch Russell Wilson anymore, right? So when I put it like that, and I thought it helped get the best answer from him of the press conference where he said that he would be booing too. So I didn't take that as a total non-answer. I thought he was saying like it was severely disappointing H-Town. That has happened to me, what you're describing in the past, but I didn't feel that way in that moment, no. Todd says, looks like Caleb and Ben Johnson are getting on the same page. Chunk plays downfield and quick hitters inside. E-Man says, that's the problem. Daboll's playbook is for Josh Allen, who's a freak. Yeah, that's right. And it worked a little bit for Jones because he is a big athletic quarterback. Matthew says, are the Giants still paying any former head coaches like Judge? I think that is part of the reason why Mara didn't fire Daboll last year. He's sick of paying former coaches. Yes, that is correct. He is sick of paying former coaches. I believe this year is Judge's final year on the payroll, and then they're out of it next season, I think. To double check that, I think that's where it stands. And yes, that is a factor, Matthew. I believe that was where it stands. Let's see. Brandon thinks Caleb Williams is going to be a top 3 quarterback and Ben Johnson will win some Super Bowls. At least Dart has some zestiness like Caleb. Yeah, Brandon, also, I will say this. I mean, I don't know what it means, but that clip of Ben Johnson and the team in the locker room fired up after the win, giving each other the game balls and talking about the win and breaking it down. I mean, there was some real serious football guy energy there. It'll pump you up if you haven't seen it. H-Town says, doesn't make sense. Wentz, Mac Jones, Mariota all won games as backups. Old Joe Flacco got a win against Packers. Golden Child Daniel Jones went 19 straight drives with points, yet Daboll is the greatest sabotage job. Let's see. Ja says this quarterback competition could have handled all of this. Talked about whether we would see Jackson on Sunday. What chances, Jared? I think it's I think there's a chance. I think I think it has to do with a conversation about, do we start Russ with the threat of benching him? Do we just go to the kid? Is Andrew Thomas healthy? Do we feel like Jameis gets the ball to Malik and just quiets the noise a little bit better? But to a lot of your guys' points, if you didn't think Dart was ready, then you would just have had Jameis as the number 2 behind Russ, right? Like, why have Dart as the number 2 to get his feet wet in specialist packages, but then elevated Jameis over him? That would be a little bit strange. I mean, Dart always took all the reps. So, behind Wilson, it was Wilson, Dart, and then it was Jameis and Tommy DeVito picking up table scraps, David G says, what's up, Big Pat? Thank you for all your hard work, especially covering this dumpster fire of an organization. You're welcome, David. Yes, it is. It wears on you at times. I'm not digging ditches here, so I'm very grateful. But man, oh man, we all need to catch a break. Alex says, we all deserve better. Appreciate you, Pat, for watching this trash for a living. You need a raise and a drink. Thank you, Alex. Intel doesn't think it makes sense to start the kid. Do you think we win a game this season, says Jared? Yes, NFL teams have NFL talent and always find a way at times to scratch out some wins, but I did predict them to win 3 games. We'll see if I was an optimist there. Giants 83 says, I can already see Neighbors getting frustrated on the sideline. Yeah, it started in week 1. Won't be long until he starts making things uncomfortable. Let's see. What else do we have here? Who's that? Jahmyr Gibbs going in. Detroit Lions take the lead, 28-21. How old is John Mara? 76. He is 70. John Mara is 70. Let's see. Russ thought the objective of red zone play was to throw the ball to hit the goalpost rugby style. Unfortunately, he was in a Giants uniform doing it. A black cloud continues to hover above this team. Colts are averaging 32 points a game, and Giants can barely get 10 points, says E-Man. Michael says, can you imagine if Daniel Jones wins MVP for the Colts if he keeps playing like this? Should win comeback player at least. Hope he does. Jones making good history while the Giants are making bad history. Buckshot says, hope you're doing well. Do you think Scattaboo will get 20 touches against the Chargers? Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. Let me double check exactly how many touches he had in this game. Cam Scattaboo had 10 carries for 60 yards and 6 catches on 8 targets for 61 yards. So that's 16 touches. I would say 15 touches is a good number to shoot for, with 20's high, but they clearly trust him, and Daboll trusts him and likes him above his other options. If Turbo's involved, though, you have 3 guys again to go to with Singletary and him. Let's see. H-Town thinks the Raiders missed with the Genty pick. Their O-line struggling too. Buckshot says, I will miss my own funeral to watch my G-Men. Very disappointed, but will never shut it off until the clock is at 0. Yeah, no, I respect that. I respect that. And that's why you're here on Talkin' Ball live with Pat Leonard. We go live post-game every week, guys. If you're not aware, we go live post-game from the stadium, home and away, where I'm following the Giants everywhere. and we download when I come right out of the locker room, talking to sources, talking to players, talking to Brian Daboll. Really just nothing like what we do right after the games. And then let's see. Yeah, we also typically go live Mondays and Thursdays. Sometimes have to take a night off here and there from those. And then we have, fun guest podcast as well. We'll be bringing more guests onto these post-game or onto these lives, maybe some post-game lives. We're going to have an odds maker from my bookie on the podcast tomorrow. So actually, this is a good crowdsource. If any of you have any betting questions for one of the primary odds makers for our sponsor, my bookie, please dump them into the queue now. And that'll help me kind of bring the information that you guys want. It could be how they make odds. It could be why they have somebody listed at certain odds when you would have expected something else. Whatever questions you have, I think that would help me prepare for that interview. Let's see. Buckshot says Andrew Thomas had 25 snaps. Do you think that number doubles? Yeah, that is a big question. He played 28 snaps to be precise on offense total. I do think the plan is to give him more. But they have to see how his body recovers and handles that extra workload, because last week was 3 practices in a week for the first time since the surgery last October, plus those 28 snaps in the game. So, they're optimistic. Daboll saying that Thomas came out of the game pretty well. Obviously, we'll have to see it for ourselves once we get into the building on Wednesday. But it does look good for an increased workload. Can't imagine the spread against the Eagles. That's right. Dan says Young Ho got redemption when their kicker they chose over him missed 2 field goals in Atlanta. No doubt, Dan. No doubt. Joe says, Pat, 6 points at home for the Giants is like 9 points. Bookies give the home team a field goal advantage. Yes, correct. H-Town says, to be real, film shows a team that is competitive but lack discipline, coaching, play calling, situational awareness, and errors on every level have kept them from a win. Can they fix and get to 3-3? I had some conversations with people today that felt like the energy just wasn't there for this team, especially once adversity struck and the second half got tougher. Let's see. Joe says, Pat, Lions look like they are back. Lions, Packers, Rams, Eagles for NFC. Mark says, Daboll and Shane could co-write an authoritative book called The Art of Losing. They've been doing it week after week, season after season, with an impressive degree of innovation and creativity. Mark, that was such a better way of saying what I keep writing, which is just the Giants find way to lose. That was such a much more intelligent way of saying it. GCN says, Pat, have the Giants recovered any fumbles or interceptions this year? Yes. Drew Phillips intercepted Dak Prescott at Dallas. I believe that's their only takeaway so far. That Bobby Okereke dropped fumble with Mahomes ripping it out of his hands was killer. And Adebo looked like he had an interception and dropped it in the second half. Francis says, which game to start, Dart? I think either this one or the next one, Chargers, Saints. I said Chargers all the way. Going back to when they first drafted him, I still think that's on the table, clearly, based on what Daboll said today. So I'll stick with that prediction. I've been on that the whole way. That Chargers week 4 will be it. But, we will see. Like I said, I think they have a lot of options. Or I think they have another option, I should say, not a lot of options. What's holding back Daboll from starting the kid makes no sense at all. Yeah, right. At 0-3 Intel, Russell Wilson already has not accomplished what you needed him to, right? So now it's just about, do you think the kid's any good or not? Do you think he's ready or not? And obviously they think he's ready and they think he's good. That's what Daboll thinks. So why not play him? That's why I think it's just the Andrew Thomas question, really, in my opinion. But they have to talk about it. If they really believed in Dart, they would have drafted him number 3, says E-Man. Fair. Let's see. They believe in him now, but your point is well taken. Tigers says 0-17, but I hope not. Intel says Dart needs to be the starting quarterback. GCN says, Pat, ask, can they set up practice accounts for people without real money? People could get used to betting and see if they like it. Interesting. They might have stuff like that already, GCN. I'll find out. Martin says, number 1, the play calling on both sides of the ball has been bad. Number 2, a decade of bad O-line play, and we wonder why DJ looks better now. Our guards and center are horrible. Number 3, Dex has been a ghost. Yes, he has. No splash plays, no major impact you'd expect from the best ET in the league like him. Disappointing. Why do most Giants fans want John Gruden? Why not Antonio Pierce, who has been here and won a Super Bowl with the Giants? Pierce, not good reviews on how he handled the Raiders, although obviously, would be an option. Well, Gruden has the offensive mind and track record. Obviously, his coaching tree being a strong one. He's on the Andy Reid tree, but then like Sean McVay was a student of his. He also really likes Jackson Dart, has a relationship already, has worked with him. Blaze says there have been rumors that if Brian Daboll is fired, the Giants will look to hire a new head coach with prior experience. Yeah, they typically go back and forth that way. As far as correcting from, let's say, youthful energy to like a strict person with experience, and then going back to somebody who's a little bit looser on the players. When the next one doesn't work out, it kind of flip-flops. Organizations do that. I would definitely expect that. That is why, some of the names we've thrown out so far, guys like Stefanski, guys like Gruden. H-Town says, how long does it take for Daboll and the company to get fired with or without Dart playing well if the record is 2-14? I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm fascinated, H-Town. I will say this to close out our chat. There were some rumblings after the game last night of, hey, where is this going? Is everybody safe? Where do things stand? Checked in with all of that today. And, there was nothing doing. Business as usual. Monday team and coaching staff was unpacking the game. Obviously not business as usual from the standpoint of reevaluating who's starting at quarterback. But I think it was interesting to me that this early I was starting to hear some uncertainty or questions about, are people's jobs on the line yet? So that's where we stand. Organizationally, as we said earlier, that Gilbert Arenas quote of all people, that is the Giants kitchen and you're going to get the same recipe in it, and whatever you cook there, and everybody leaves and then you get a better meal, essentially, to use the restaurant analogy. It's just perfectly said about the fact that the problems go above Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll to ownership and their inabilities in, hiring the right people, their inability to self-evaluate, and they're showing impatience when they've promised more time to people, showing too much patience to people who don't deserve it, and ultimately are creating the construct and the enabling of this losing culture that has now seeped into everything that the Giants do. But that leads us to when is enough enough? When is enough of this? It's not even mediocrity, this embarrassment, this constant losing. How can John Mara and Steve Tisch stomach this? You have Odell Beckham Jr. in the house in the Tisch suite for the Monday night game, or for the Sunday night game. You had Lawrence Taylor in the house, and you have, who was Brandon Jacobs, I think, was ringing the bell, and you're just putting an embarrassing, you're getting embarrassing results. You can't get wins, and it's just not acceptable. So the big picture is this GM and coach, the seats get hotter and hotter every week, but the short term is who's the quarterback. I think Russell Wilson needs to be benched regardless of who it's going to be. I believe if they think Jackson Dart's ready, and if Andrew Thomas is ready to play more than he played in the previous game, then I would think Jackson Dart would be the starting quarterback in week 4. At the very most, if he's not the starting quarterback, it would be short leash for Russell Wilson with Jackson Dart as his backup. As I said, though, I do think Jameis Winston needs to be considered. I believe you have to have the team, the players reacting and thinking and knowing that you're putting the best product on the field, the best team on the field. If the best way to get Malik involved and unlock this offense and keep everybody at bay, even if you're not getting losses, is to have Jameis throwing it around the yard, then that's where you go. But again, throughout camp, it was Russell Wilson, and then it was Dart really taking all the rest of the reps with Jameis and Tommy DeVito bringing up the rear. So it's hard to imagine that they're going to change the order of that, even though, like I said, I still think number 19 deserves a shot and should be in that conversation. But as we wrap up here, Joe says you need to write a book or podcast, especially or about what happened during the Shane and Daboll years, get players and sources to spill on all the problems. I could write a book like that. I don't know how entertaining it would be. Maybe it'd be informative, but you Giants fans might not want to hear that much about it if this team starts turning around and a year later that book comes out. H-Town says O'Hara for interim head coach, Pat for GM until they write the blank check for Jeff Hafley. Dan says it must be really tough for guys like Carl Banks, Sean O'Hara, Toomer, and Howard Cross to see this week in and week out. I promise you it is for guys I talk to anyway. GCN says, Pat, ask Kurt Warner who should be the new coach and GM. Giants should hire him as a quarterback consultant. Don't disagree with that, GCN. Thank you all to everybody for being here. My bookie, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, and Sal Loretta's are the sponsors. As we wrap up, we'll throw the ticker on the bottom. My bookie, the code is Leonard. Boom Chaga, the code is Talkin Ball 25, and Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, the code is Talkin Ball 20. Is Talkin Ball, just flat out Talkin Ball. So again, the codes are Leonard at mybookie.ag for all your sports betting. At Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, it is Talkin Ball for 15% off. And at Boom Chaga, it is Talkin Ball 25 for 25% off. Dan says, thanks for the stream. As always, Pat, hit that like button. Yes, hit that like button on your way out. Thank you especially to our super chatters tonight. Novice checked in several times. PM also supporting the cause a couple times. Candyman, Steve Keys. Really appreciate all of you weighing in, supporting financially, and all of you supporting with your voices and your questions and your analysis and your information. Really appreciate all of you. As Martin says, he does like that they finally used a lot of misdirection and pre-snap motion in the run game versus the first 2 weeks of vanilla play calling. We want to see them create more of an advantage. It needs to start with the scheme. It needs to start with the roster and the personnel they're putting on the field. But by and large, this week it comes down to the quarterback position. Will it be Jackson Dart? Will it be Russell Wilson? Will it be Jameis Winston? It needs to be someone other than Wilson, in my opinion. Put the rookie in now. Have a great night, guys.